The problem child, Jake Paul, is set to return to the ring against former UFC welterweight champion Tyron Woodley on August 28th on Showtime. In today's video, we're going to talk about it and I'm going to share my perspective. But before we start, welcome back to the channel. Make sure to smash the like button and do me a favour, subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't already. So people, the gotcha hat merchant Jake Paul, he's bagged himself a contract with Showtime and he's now facing Tyron Woodley in his first fight on that contract. If you don't know who Tyron Woodley is, he's a former UFC champion at welterweight. He's renowned for his striking ability, but obviously striking in MMA and boxing are two completely different worlds. The fact that people like to compare boxing striking and MMA striking as if it means anything is something I find quite strange, because in boxing you're only focusing on your opponent's upper body movement and their hands basically. So there's a lot more technical ability and ring IQ that come into play, because you've got to understand, your opponents and how they react to certain feints, etc. Whereas in MMA, the striking is obviously a big part of the sport, but it's not as technical as boxing striking. So I think people saying that Tyron Woodley has a good chance in this fight because he's a good striker, okay, you can be a good striker in MMA, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily a good striker. Well, you're good at boxing. So essentially, my initial reaction to this news is that I think Jake Paul is going to defeat Tyron Woodley. Whether it comes by knockout or not, I think that depends on the toughness of Tyron Woodley, and not necessarily the toughness on its own, because obviously we saw Ben Askren get knocked out with one punch. But you need to have those survival instincts, and not necessarily survival instincts, but the ability to read and understand when those big combinations or those big one punches are being thrown. And if Tyron Woodley can learn to understand that in the short amount of time that he's got in training camp, then he could possibly survive the distance. But I'm not too sure about that. I think Jake Paul is very good at setting traps for opponents, drawing them onto that big right hand. I think that's basically Jake Paul's plan A. His plan A is to throw 1-2s all night long, eventually lure you into a full sense of security where you walk forward and he times a wonderful 1-2 jab right hand and you're out, because he clearly has some decent power. And see, this is why there's a difference between boxers and MMA fighters. The way Jake Paul's going around fighting these MMA guys, he's getting away with it because they're combat sports artists. They're combat athletes, right? Boxers have a specific skill set. That sort of jab right hand merchant behavior, that's not going to work with a seasoned boxer. They're going to read the trap basically. Whereas MMA fighters that have been in a 6 to 8 week training camp, they're not really going to learn to avoid those sort of basic traps. So yeah, I think it's very possible, and if not very possible, very likely, that Jake Paul will stop Tyron Woodley in this fight. Whether it's a one punch KO, I'm not too sure. But let's talk about what will happen if Jake Paul does win this fight. You've got Jake Paul's brother fighting Floyd Mayweather on June 6th. You'd expect Floyd Mayweather to beat the crap out of Logan Paul. And that's what I fully expect. I fully expect Floyd Mayweather to beat the hell out of Logan Paul for the disrespect that he's been putting on Floyd's name recently. Okay, whether you like Floyd as a personality or not, as a character or not, whether you think he's done some bad things in his past or not, he is the greatest defensive fighter in the history of the sport, right? And not only that, you don't get to the top without being good offensively. Just because Floyd is old and his hands are shot doesn't mean he won't be able to generate enough power to beat Logan Paul and maybe even knock him out. So all of these, let me call them idiots, claiming that Logan Paul even has a chance in this fight, you're going to be very upset on June 6th after you pay your $65 pay-per-view and you see your guy get beat up, okay? But back on topic, Jake Paul will probably fight Floyd Mayweather after Floyd beats his brother Logan and Jake beats Tyron Woodley maybe sometime in December, and that's going to be on Showtime. This is obviously why Jake Paul was signed a promotional deal with Showtime, because they're lining up Floyd Mayweather versus Jake Paul. So essentially Jake Paul's run of terror is going to be ended by Floyd Mayweather. But anyway, enough of my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I want to know what you guys think about this whole situation. Smash the like button if you did enjoy, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and turn on post notifications so that you never miss a single video.